Welcome into another Moss Football Friday, and the whole crew is here. We've got a huge week in Vegas, Mac, TJ, all kinds of stuff going on. There's a lot of interesting stuff in sports, football-wise specifically, guys. How in the hell are you?
Doing well, man. Can't wait.
You know this. Let's go. Let's go. I'm ready.
You know, obviously, if you didn't hear about it and you didn't know who he was today, Matt Sluka is the name at the top of everybody's list. Per his agent, Marcus Cromartie, we're talking about the UNLV quarterback. He agreed to go to UNLV for $100,000, which now, depending on who you listen to, was hearsay. Standard for a quarterback in the group of five, about $100,000, but apparently he turned down bigger offers there. UNLV is in the mix as one of those teams that can be a group of five. And this is interesting because I know both of you guys have a good perspective on this. TJ, from your time in Vegas, and Mac, your current time in Vegas. TJ, I'll start with you as a Mountain West guy specifically. Here we go. Like, what is going on?
This is just going to be another one of those dominoes in this Mountain West Pac-12, who's getting paid what deal. This is just, and look, the general consensus is that he quit. He straight up quit. And that's a bad look. And if he thinks he's going to get the money from anybody else that he got from UNLV, allegedly, this guy's barking up the wrong tree, literally. In my case.
Mac, you're in the Vegas market right now. You're going to the game on Saturday against Fresno State. And this story's been fascinating. And before we get into the old man yelling at the cloud thing, what are you hearing locally from the people in Vegas on this?
Well, first off, they're very excited that UNLV is actually relevant as a national football talking stick, whether it's through the alignment going to the Pac-12 or wherever they're going. And now this whole deal, it's very, very interesting. Again, what TJ, exactly what you said, everything points to this kid just decided to quit. And obviously he's not the only one. There's also one of the running backs decided to, leave as well. So it's very, very interesting. But one of the better takes that I heard this year is here's a team that's had a couple of really good wins. They, as you said, could get to the playoffs if things worked out. And this kid doesn't understand Vegas. He could have Vegas forever. He could go under the name of Anderson Hunt and Larry Johnson if this team made it to the playoffs. It's that big a deal here.
Yeah, and it's kind of fascinating to me. And Tej, again, your time as a youngster out there, I mean, you know this better than anybody does. And, you know, some people are going to hear Anderson Hunt and that group of the running Rebels and be blown off their chairs right now. But I don't think it's a bad comparison, TJ. I mean, you were there at the height of it.
For a football team that has as many winning seasons, I can count them on both of my hands. In their history of their football program, they've had, I think, 8 winning seasons. So, yes, I agree. He could have been the guy, and he quit. He just quit. And I agree. He doesn't understand. I don't know if it's just I'm coming from a smaller school, and now I'm going to the big school, and I'm going to cash in, but he just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand how it works. And yeah, those are nice wins, but I mean, let's be real. Nevada hung with Kansas last year. Okay. So I don't think Kansas is that big of a deal. A couple nice wins. Yes. But before we start putting UNLV in the playoff, let's see if they can have a decent season 2 years in a row.
And here's the thing. It's just all the little things now that they're ripping this kid for. His goodbye, if you will, profile that he put out, whether it was, I think it was on Instagram or whatnot, the picture that he had in the back, Sam Boyd Stadium. They haven't used that stadium since 2019. So
is that monstrosity still standing in Vegas? Is it still actually there?
It's still there.
You know, when you look at it going forward for the Rebels, I mean, the home game against Fresno State, that's a noon 30 kickoff on the West Coast on FS1. Then they go to another home game where they get Syracuse, arguably probably one of the biggest games that they've ever had in Vegas. And then Utah State, the recent defector to the Pac-12, whatever the hell is going on there. And then Oregon State and then Boise State. So right now, when you look at it from a grand scheme of things with the way the new playoff format sets itself up, you're talking about UNLV and Boise State being in the driver's seat to get that 12 seed for the automatic into the tournament, if you will. Your prize is going to be a road game against the team that loses the SEC. But I mean, for Boise, not so much. For UNLV, high praise. And I think the thing we got to remember as we're going into this, all of these collectives are third parties. They're bag men. And in the SEC, in the ACC, in the Big Ten, I mean, sorry, I put the ACC in good conference standing. That conference has been abhorrent to watch to this point. But they're bag men. That's what they are. And this doesn't happen somewhere else. And this has turned into a giant he said versus he said. And definitely not a distraction that you want if you're the Rebels. The spread went from 3.5 overnight. It actually went to Fresno State's side. Couldn't jump on it then. It's back to about 1.5 the last I saw. But definitely something to keep your eye on. And UNLV is relevant in football again, just not really the way they wanted to continue to be relevant off to the good start. Barry Odom's done a hell of a job in his short time there already, and just not what you want to see. But this is what it is. This is what college football is.
You know, the other thing is, I mean, yes, they're 3-0 and they've played well. He's been a good quarterback. He hasn't been a great quarterback. There's a lot of talk that this actually may be a benefit for UNLV. It may actually open up their passing game just a little bit more. So, yeah, you hate to see a kid leave, but listen, the feeling around town is that this is maybe not such a bad thing for the Rebels.
First off, I think we've been talking about UNLV football way too much already. It's making
I
me
knew
nauseous.
that was coming.
But look, you're right. This team, this is a situation where this could be a really good football team. I agree. Odom's done a bang up job, but let's like cool everybody's jets for a minute here. Okay. Cause think about who we're talking about. And that's schedule that you mentioned, although it's not a murderer's row, in the past has not been successful for the Rebels to navigate. So before we start crowning their asses, let's see what they've got here. And I don't really have a good read on their quarterback situation now, but I saw an a Twitter post of their new QB1 who said, "Let's ride." And all I thought of was Russell Wilson and something disastrous happening. So I want to see
Rebel
it first.
country, let's ride.
I'm interested to see what happens in this game. I'll probably watch it for a little bit, but I have a couple others that I'll key you in on later that I'm more excited to watch.
We'll get to that in just a second when we talk about the AP top 12, if you will, and the MAC 12 that we put out every week for you on Tuesdays. Number 1, straight across the board, it's Texas and Texas. When we get into number 2, that's where it gets a little interesting as far as the differentiation of the rankings. The AP top 25 has Georgia number 2. The MAC 12, we have Ole Miss number 2. We'll finish the AP. It goes Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss in the top 6. Ours, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Mizzou. So as we go into this weekend, there's some interesting matchups. Obviously, the biggest one that TJ you'll have more on in After Dark on Saturday is Georgia, Bama. They don't get much bigger than that. But there's the interesting thing here of the over, and I'll get to this when we finish up later too. Preseason rankings are the most useless thing in the world. You've got Georgia number 2, Ohio State number 3. Ohio State hasn't been very impressive in their cupcake schedule. So if we're comparing cupcakes to cupcakes, I don't want to hear, well, they haven't played anybody, because nobody here has really played anybody yet, except for Texas, who went into Michigan and beat the holy hell out of the Wolverines, who bounced back by beating, USC last week. So where do we go? And I'll start with you, Mac, because you're the one that has to tabulate all of our nonsense when we send you our rankings. Texas is 1. Let's go to 2 and compare Georgia and Ole Miss, a couple of SEC teams right away.
Yeah, my biggest thing is this. It's, Ole Miss is just, they put up numbers. Yeah, the competition hasn't been there. But listen, they're still putting up those numbers, and that's what all that matters as far as I'm concerned. I don't care about what you did last year. I care about what you did this year, and they've been consistent. And this team is built over the last couple of years, and they're a fun team to watch, and that's what the ranking should be. It should be about what we're seeing with our eyes this year, not what we saw last year. Yeah, is Georgia better? I don't know. We'll see. This is going to be a good contest. They're going up against Kentucky. We know what Kentucky did against Georgia a couple of weeks ago. So what happens if it's another blowout by Ole Miss. What does that say about Georgia?
Yeah, exactly. TJ, what are your thoughts on the shifting at the top so far?
Well, first off, I want to go back to your point about preseason rankings. I'm going to take that one step further. I don't think there should be any rankings for at least the first 6 weeks. These schedules are so just not balanced. I mean, we've talked a bit about Tennessee in recent weeks, and Tennessee's schedule, like Tennessee has looked really good, but I mean, really, Chattanooga, we're going to measure a team and put a guy in the Heisman race because of a game against Chattanooga and Kent State. Like, give
Lay
me a
off
break.
of Nico. Keep his name out your mouth.
But I give him his I think I told you, look, against Oklahoma, he looked great. They look great. But that being said, yeah, I expect a lot of jumbling around there at the top right now, just because of all the, teams playing good teams playing bad teams. How do you rank this win? Look, Georgia's playing Alabama. If Alabama wins, are they the new number one? Because I don't think Texas is playing a team the caliber of Georgia this week. So, I expect these things to bounce around a little bit, but I think that they should just save the time and not even offer full rankings until at least October.
There's a lot of good case for that argument. It's and I'll get to this a little bit later before we get out of here, but it's the same thing with the NFL. We're putting out power rankings based on rosters in preseason, and we're power ranking teams after one damn week. Like, what do you know? What do any of us know at this point? As far as 1 week rankings and Texas that you just mentioned, they get a really bad Mississippi State team. The only team that's as bad as they are in the SEC is Florida, and Florida went in there and punked them on their home field, but Florida also almost gave up 500 yards to them. Florida is a whole different disaster of crap bag on your doorstep flaming right now. But, when you get a little bit farther into it, Georgia, Bama, that's going to settle some questions this week. It looks like we're universal across the board on Tennessee. When we get later into it, Miami, Utah, that's the 7th spot, AP to the MAC-12. Oregon to Ohio State, AP to MAC-12. And you guys all know what I think of Oregon and Dan Lanning. They've got off to a slow start. I think they're going to absolutely manhandle a very, very bad UCLA team this week. Dillon Gabriel is passing, and I'm sure you're going to hear a little bit more about Dillon Gabriel this week. We've got our Heisman watch still to come out, but that Oregon team is dangerous. Call me a Dan Lanning homer. Fine. I was all over Washington last year, and how did that work out till the very end? Mac, what is the difference at the bottom for you? Because you slid a team in that I know you're going to have some more thoughts on at the end of the week. Louisville into the bottom spot in the MAC-12.
Yeah, again, this is a team that, competition, but they're continuing to play well. They had a really good season last year, and they're building off of that. This is a team, Notre Dame, that they beat at home last year, and so Notre Dame's going to have that in their mind as well. But again, my biggest question in this game is more about Notre Dame. I mean, what are we getting with Notre Dame? I mean, they look great against A&M, and then we all know what happened after that. And so this is a great opportunity for the Cardinal. If they can go in and win this game, man, it's going to say a lot, not only about them, but it's going to say a lot about Notre Dame as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's take a spin now as we go forward. Penn State, Illinois, that's another big one this week. Mizzou is kind of a team, and you mentioned it, Mac, in your Laces Out segment. Mizzou's a team that we don't really know what we have in Mizzou, but we know Brady Cook and Luther Burden III are going to get you a long way no matter who you're facing. A lot of interesting stuff. So when we lock into this weekend, and Tej, I'll start with you. What is your favorite game on the slate, the one that's got the most attention from you on the college side of things this weekend?
Well, it's one you already mentioned. It's Illinois, Penn State, for a couple of reasons. Number one, Penn State does not have a great track record against top 25 teams. And I don't know if it's just the James Franklin factor or what it is, but you put a little number in front of that opponent and something just happens, and they just don't perform it to their capabilities. And it's been consistent over the entire tenure of James Franklin. Meanwhile, you have an Illinois team that's coming off a big road win at Nebraska, but I still don't know, are they 19th or are you do you have a little bit of inflated number there because they're undefeated? So, that's kind of where I'm at. That being said, I'm really excited to see what Illinois does, because I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of getting close to jumping on that bandwagon here, just because I really liked what I saw last Friday night.
Yeah, and we've all shared our questions, if you will, on Nebraska and loving the direction that they're going. And again, we get wowed by Dylan Raiola, and if you looked at it last week, a freshman, inexperienced, big game moment, one pass that he overthrows by a couple of yards, or that game ends up a completely different way. That's a good one. Mac, what's the one that's got your eyeballs this weekend?
I like Ole Miss in Kentucky. It's going to give me something to compare. We know what Kentucky did, as I said, against a Georgia team. Let's see what happens in this game. If Kentucky can shut down Ole Miss, then maybe Ole Miss isn't as good as we think they are. Or maybe they are. What if they put up some of those video game numbers against this Kentucky team? Again, what does that say about Georgia? So that for me is one of those games where it's a little bit of a litmus test for me to see how both these teams are.
Yeah, and the one that kind of got my attention, and I didn't expect this one, but as the more I looked at it, Wisco at USC. And we saw USC go into the big house last week. We saw them struggle mightily. They looked horrible in playing against Michigan in their Big Ten opener. When you saw the second half of that game, Miller Moss started to get settled. TJ, you mentioned it in Head of the Class. I mean, their defense really locked out 100% the Michigan passing attack. Not that there's much of a Michigan passing attack, but I liked what I saw out of USC in the second half. Now they come home, they play a Wisconsin team that we saw get just absolutely manhandled at Camp Randall. Granted, it was to Alabama, but USC's got a big number to cover here. 15.5 at the last check, over and under at 51.5. And I can see this game easily going over, and I can see USC easily manhandling Wisconsin. But I've learned something over the last couple of years, and you might say I'm from Norman at this point when I say this, but I don't trust Lincoln Riley. I don't think he's a good coach. I don't think he's a guy that's going to win you a national title anywhere. I don't want to see him anywhere near Gainesville for personal interest if that keeps coming up. I don't know what to expect out of this USC team, because in the second half, they were a way better team than they were in the first half.
Oh, yeah, I believe you. Well, my whole thing with USC is they haven't beaten Utah in a bit, and that just says a lot to me. When the chips are on the table, they crap the bed against Utah multiple times. Look, I don't know what to expect from USC either. Is it going to be the second half? Because you're right, the second half they played lights out, and they just happened to give up a 63-yard run at the wrong time, and that was the end of that. But yeah, they totally 32 yards passing for Michigan in the entire game, 32. But what I liked about Michigan is Michigan just said, okay, we're going to run the ball then and try and stop us. And that's what made it happen. Wisconsin, not too good coming out west. But it's a conference game now, which makes a huge difference for Wisconsin. So
the noon 30 kickoff out west for Wisco too. That's an interesting spot for them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. I'm actually excited to kind of have that on the TV for a little bit, just because I want to see how the Big Ten is accepted by USC and how the Trojan faithful are going to react. I'm sure it's going to be just jacked up.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about some of those interesting things with the conference alignment. Florida State, that dumpster fire, heads to Dallas to take on SMU, coming off of an interesting week for the Mustangs. Now is where we get to see some of that stuff. Some of the things that also pop up on the list. Colorado at UCF is interesting to me. What can the Buffs do on the road? This is a UCF team, much like USC. Maybe if you have 3 letters in your name, that's why we can't figure you out. But UCF is a 14.5-point favorite over the Buffaloes and a 64.5-point total in that game. The other one, and I know both of you guys will have some thoughts on this one, and this was I jumped on this the second I saw it. Call me recency bias, whatever. But BYU is going to Baylor. It's a 9 a.m. kickoff on FS1 on the West Coast, noon Eastern. Baylor is a 3.5-point favorite over BYU. and I get it. There's two schools of thought here, and I know both of you will have some thoughts on this. BYU coming off of an emotional win, a crazy environment. They manhandled Kansas State. And you're telling me from what you've seen out of Baylor, and I know the guys in Vegas are all smarter than us, but what you've seen out of Baylor, that you're going to give me a plus 142 money line on BYU on the road in that game? I jumped on it right away with zero hesitation. I get there's a letdown factor. That's a possibility. But Baylor? Come on.
It's very tempting to jump on that. I totally agree with you. But Baylor and BYU have gone back and forth the last couple of years when they've met head to head. BYU beat them last in 22 at home, but then BYU blew them out the year before at Baylor. So I'm sorry, Baylor blew them out at Baylor. So this is a very interesting number. You know what I really like in this game? I'm gonna go above 45.5 on this one for sure.
TJ's favorite bets, points.
You know it.
What do you think? Is there another game that pops out, Mac, before we move on to the pro circuit here? I couldn't believe that one when I saw it today.
The other one of interest to me is Arkansas and Texas A&M, because Arkansas is one of those teams. I mean, they honestly could be undefeated at this point as well. I mean, I just don't know what they are. Texas A&M, again, it's one of those teams I'm not sure of. So this is two teams that really aren't all that bad, but from week to week, we just don't know what we're getting. So that was one that kind of just stuck out for me. I want to see if one of these teams steps up and decides they're going to play some big football.
Yeah, and it's about time for Arkansas to do that. Otherwise, Sam Pittman and his light-up hog above his pool in the backyard won't be worth a damn anymore. Let's shift to the NFL side of things. And before we get into our games for this weekend, we got to talk about the Buffalo Bills. They're 3-0, and I don't necessarily know how or why. They played a game. Cardinals team were able to come away with the win. They manhandled the Dolphins, obviously the Tua injury. And then we saw them on Monday night just absolutely impale the Jaguars. Are we going to find out what this team's really made of with the next three at Baltimore on Sunday Night Football this week, at Houston, and then Monday Night Football against the New York Jets? Guys, 75% for Josh Allen, 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's also got 85 yards on 17 carries. What are your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills?
Well, here's the thing, Mike. Those 3 games that you talked about, Baltimore, the Texans, and the Jets, that's who everybody talked about all preseason. Notice not too many people talked about the Buffalo Bills, and I think that's exactly what the Buffalo Bills like right now. You're not talking about us. We're not relevant. We don't care. Hey, we're just going to go out and win some football games. And, oh, hey, by the way, when it's all said and done, we're going to be in the playoffs, and you're just going to have to come up to Buffalo. It's going to snow 3 feet of snow, and we're going to ram it down your throat again. That's what I think the Buffalo Bills are about.
It's going to snow 3 feet of snow, and then they'll move the game to a Tuesday night is what they're going to do. You know this. Look, I'm going to be the first person to eat my shoe on this one. I thought Jacksonville was going to play a whole hell of a lot better. I called it that and the under, and I had my crap handed to me. Look, Buffalo looked really good, and I'm not. But is Jacksonville that bad? I don't think they're that bad. I think Buffalo just dominated that game. And so this matchup against the Ravens, this is a Ravens team that's up and down as well. Lost to the Raiders, lost to the Panthers. But then, they bounce back. So this is going to be a very, very interesting matchup. I'm looking forward to it. I think this is going to say a lot about the Bills and if they're for real or not. Because like you said, Mike, it was in the AFC East, it was all about the Jets and all about the Dolphins. Well, one of those teams is not in such good shape right now. So in fact, if you go on social media, you can see a very how should I say, appropriate illustration of what they are right now. So vis-a-vis Skylar Thompson.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And this team lacks depth. They're off to a good start. 3-0 is exactly that. It's 3-0. Power ranking wise, wherever the hell you want to put them, just stuff it. I don't care about your power rankings 3 weeks into the season. This team does not have depth. And it's funny because for a guy that's picked the Buffalo Bills to go to the Super Bowl more times than not over the last handful of years, I just don't see it. They're 3-0. I'll give them credit for that. Josh Allen's playing great. But the depth on this team is not something that's sustainable. They are walking a tightrope. And you never, obviously, I'm not saying I want anybody to get hurt. I love Josh Allen. Outside of Buffalo and 100 people outside of Buffalo, you might not find a bigger fan of Josh Allen's than me. I know at least a few of us involved in this project have great friends, best of friends for lifetimes that are Bills fans. We've seen them go through the agony. But you guys, the ones that I'm talking to right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about when we've seen this from this Buffalo team before. And they look like world beaters. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the season or 2/3 of the way through the season, what the hell happened to Buffalo? Oh, by the way, there's Patrick Mahomes. Save it, tinfoil TJ. I don't want to hear it right now. But I've seen this before from Buffalo, so I'm not going to buy into what Buffalo wants me to think they are, because I don't know if I think that they are that.
But they're going to win. They're going to win their division. There's nobody in that division that's going to touch them. Yeah, don't give me the Jets. That's not. Who else is going to beat them?
Well, I know who's not going to beat them is the Patriots. Okay, obviously, without Tua. I'm 3 weeks from now, I will be glued. I can't wait to find out what Monday Night Mike says on that. Right now, every time I pick against the Bills, it's great for Bills fans. So I'm just not buying it. And I'm not buying the fact that it's their division to lose. I'm not. When Aaron Rodgers is healthy and that defense for the Jets is playing the way they are, I don't think we can just sit here and say a Buffalo team that's consistently not gotten the job done is better than the Jets.
Well, this is going to be interesting for Buffalo because after Baltimore, they go to Houston, then they go to the Jets, and then they have Tennessee at home.
Uh-huh.
So that's going to give us a huge sample size of whether they're in this for real or whether they're just going to play second fiddle to the Jets.
I'm all in on Buffalo this week, that's for sure.
I was not a believer last week, and I had my lunch handed to me. So but that's Jacksonville. That was not Baltimore. However, I'm kind of concerned. If I'm a Ravens fan, I'm concerned about Baltimore. I really am, because you can almost make a case that them and the Bills have been in identical positions for the last few years. I can tell you that I thought the Ravens were the team last year. I really did, and then they get to the end and blow it. And this year they're up and down, and so I don't know what to think with Baltimore.
I really thought getting Henry was going to help them a whole lot more, but for some reason they've used him a little bit more the last couple of weeks, but it doesn't seem like they've incorporated him enough. I just thought, I know their offensive line lost a lot in the offseason, but I still thought, you got Derrick Henry. Just pound that guy, take a little bit of pressure off of the offense, but they just haven't incorporated him enough.
So Max sold on the Bills. You've heard it there. The biggest Bills fan and Falcons fan this year is Vegas Mac himself. TJ, where do you sit on the Bills? Are you on my side of the argument or on Mac's side of the argument, or are you going to be Switzerland here?
Bro, I'm totally Switzerland right now. I'm on a wait and see guy. But this game's going to tell me a lot. But as far as the division goes, it's not going to matter until they play the Jets. It really isn't. Like, they're going to, depending on the status of Tua, they're so far and away from everybody right now. So it's them and the Jets. That's pretty much what we've been hearing about Miami. But I'm sure Buffalo, like you said, Mike, is thrilled. Like, they're 3-0. Like, they're 3-0. You can't argue with that. And so they're in a really good position right now. But I still don't think, I agree with you, though, with the depth issue. I don't think their skill players are nearly as good as other teams in the AFC. And they're not as good. Are they better? Are the skill players better than Kansas City? I don't think so. Are they better than the Jets? I don't know. I kind of put Allen and Rodgers is 12 years older, but Rodgers has the pedigree. Allen hasn't won anything. And I think before we start crowning people and telling people that they're great, they need to win something. I'll put them with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has not won anything.
Don't get me started on the Bengals right now. Don't get me started on the Bengals right now. I just, the depth issue when we're comparatively speaking, and I know Mac, you comparatively to the Chiefs, I know you've got something to say there, but like when I look at what Buffalo has, your leading target share is to Khalil Shakir. I love that guy. I think he's a change of pace receiver. James Cook is their third most targeted guy behind Dalton Kincaid. We've got this, that, and the other thing, and it's like, the depth that the Bills have had and not been able to cash in and get it done in the past. You saw a tremendous effort from the defense. I'm sorry, Buffalo, you can at me all you want. I could be your good luck charm all year. I can be your Huckleberry. I can be whatever you want me to be. I've done this with you guys before, and it's burned me at the end. I would love to see my dream Super Bowl. I could ride off into the sunset of caring who's in the Super Bowl. You give me Bills, you give me Niners one year, just one time. I just want to see it. But I've done this dance with the Bills before, and I've gotten burned. Final thought here, Mac, before we go to our highlight games of the weekend.
Like I said, I think they're in a good spot because nobody is looking at them. Do I think, like you said, there is skill to some of the other teams? No, but listen, the bottom line is they're getting stuff done. And both, just like the Steelers, it's the same thing. Nobody expected the Steelers to be 3-0, and they're just getting it done, and that's all that matters. 3-0 is 3-0.
It is, and we'll talk about those Steelers in just a minute. Our highlight games for the weekend, I'll get us started, guys. This one jumped off the page the second I saw it. And it's interesting when you dive into the numbers, but it's the Minnesota Vikings at 3-0 heading to Lambeau. It's an early game on Sunday. Right now, the Packers 2.5-point favorites. 43.5 is the over-under. You can get Minnesota on the money line for plus 120. I got it at plus 142 a little bit earlier. You've got a lot of factors in this game. Green Bay is number one in turnover differential at a plus 7. Minnesota is number one, as I talked about in the man crush, at 16 sacks through 3 games. And here's what I'll tell you about this Vikings defense. Oh, by the way, Aaron Jones coming back to Lambeau Field, who's planning a Lambeau leap. If he gets into the end zone, it'll be interesting to see how that gets received. Here's the thing about the Vikings defense. And I'm not going to have this argument with anybody, because if you're still arguing whether or not Brock Purdy is a good quarterback, then you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know ball. There's been 2 coaches that have made Brock Purdy look pedestrian since he came in and took the Niners starting job. One of those is Mike Macdonald, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks that I've been harping on for a long time. The other one is Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator of the Vikings. Listen, no shade on Malik Willis. He played really well last week, filling in for Jordan Love. But I stated my case on the Packers at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to sit there. Their defense is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. But right now, you can't touch this Vikings defense, and Sam Darnold is playing at a really high clip. And to use Coach Belichick saying the other day, everybody that's had Sam Darnold has loved him except for the Jets. So Minnesota going in there at a 2.5-point dog, I jumped them just like I did BYU. I took them on the money line. I love the spot for the Vikings. I'm a believer. Yes, it's only 3 weeks, like we were just talking about with Buffalo. Mac, what do you think? Am I right or wrong on there?
I agree. I think this Minnesota team is really good. We know what they did last year with Cousins, but Sam Darnold, it's about, and it's one of the things I talk about. Sometimes it's just you need time. These quarterbacks sometimes need time, and they don't always get it. I mean, we have to remember, some of the best quarterbacks that ever played didn't play their first year or two. They got to watch a little bit, and now we're throwing these guys in situations where we're expecting them to do so much. Like you said, everybody loves Sam Darnold. He's finally starting to, I think, understand the game. He's in a system where it's beneficial to him. This Vikings team is good.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And, TJ, we talked about it a little bit last week, buying points, not buying points, positions, blah, blah, blah. When you look at that line, what do you see in that game?
Well, what I see is this is a game that's going to show us if Malik Willis is ready to take that step and be a full, like the whole package at quarterback, because I see up to now that he's like last week, he was able to be a game manager. is basically what he's been able to do. Now you're going to have to go win the game. Like you can hand off to Josh Jacobs all you want, but eventually you're going to have to throw to Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs and make plays.
Yeah, we're big Watson. Romeo Doubs guys in this house. So,
oh yeah, for sure. And that's how this game is going to be won, because if you're Green Bay, because that Minnesota front is amazing, but the pass defense is not so great. And so if you're Malik Willis and you can get those 10, 15, 20-yard passes getting down the field, you can beat this Minnesota team. But can he do it? That's what we have to find out. Can he do it?
Yeah, that'll be a very interesting spot. Mac, what's your game spotlight-wise for the weekend?
I got the Saints, and then I guess my new favorite team, because I seem like I watch them every week, and that's Atlanta. I don't know why. Holy cow. I'm going to have to go and get a Falcons shirt or something. But it's a very intriguing game to me. Again, we've said this about a lot of teams, but I'm not quite sure what Atlanta is. I think they can be really good. They have the pieces. They have two just great running backs that can, beat you up and down. I mean, they have a quarterback that, again, understands what he needs to do. They have a pretty good defense. Both these teams are almost like mirror images for me. I don't know what I'm going to get. I still watched the Saints last week. I was really, really impressed with what they were doing. But again, it is Derek Carr. We know how he can be. Looks really good one week, next week not so good. So these two teams, there's just a lot of questions about these teams. I feel they could both be playoff teams, or I feel they could end up being picking in one of the first 5 picks in the draft. I'm still not sure.
President of the Derek Carr fan club, go for it, TJ.
They're both frauds, and that has nothing to do with me having New Orleans on the money line last week. But they're both frauds. Look, I kind of agree with you. I especially agree with your last point, Mac. These two teams, you look at them and I picked someone I know picked the Falcons to make the playoffs. But I've told you guys before offline, the Saints are what the Raiders should have been. I like the addition of Chase Young. I liked what they did to their defense. They have weapons. Alvin Kamara is a great running back. And so, but now it's time. There's no more excuses for New Orleans. The Drew Brees, that boat sailed. Now Derek Carr has to prove that he's a quarterback that can lead a team to the playoffs and a win. Meanwhile, you got Kirk Cousins, which, look, I love the acquisition of Kirk Cousins. I thought it was a great move by the Falcons. It reminded me of when the Raiders picked up Rich Gannon in the early 2000s. But that Falcon, I watched that game against the Steelers, and I like, what were you doing? Now, that being said, and I think I told you both this offline as well, the first week is almost like a glorified preseason game because none of those bloody guys have played. And so we get what we get in week 1 and we get what we get in week 2. This is going to be fun to watch for me in a way, because I want to see who the real fraud is. I want to see if it's Atlanta or New Orleans, because like you said, Mac, these teams could just as easily be in the top 10 in the draft, and Tampa Bay can just sneak in there and steal the division.
Will the real fraud please stand up? Alvin Kamara, questionable. He's dealing with a rib and a hip. So that's something obviously to monitor. Looks like it's kind of settling in as a game time decision. Atlanta, 2.5-point favorites, 42.5 on the over under. President of the Derek Carr fan club, what's the game that you got your eyeballs on this weekend?
Oh, you're going to love this one. You ready? Seattle and Detroit.
Yes.
And hear me out a little bit, because this is all about expectations as well. So I'm the guy, once again, I'm gonna proudly say it. I picked Detroit to go to the Super Bowl this year, and I know it's the sexy pick for a lot of people to go far in the playoffs. Detroit made a statement last year. They were an outstanding team. Dan Campbell had this team believing, and they were a couple of plays away from going, and they just couldn't get it done. So, of course, we expect, as fans, we expect linear progression, right? And unfortunately, that's not always the case. Meanwhile, you have a Seattle team that when they brought in Geno Smith, I was laughing my balls off because I was like, what are you doing? This guy is washed up and he's garbage. And it turns out he's actually given a chance and given a good players around him. He's actually pretty good. And so this Seattle team is, they haven't been glamorous in they beat Miami, but it's Miami right now. But you barely beat New England. You barely beat Denver. Who is this Seattle team? Yet, like we've said about Buffalo and like we said about Pittsburgh, you're 3-0. You're leading your division. Okay, that's a really good spot to be in. So let's see if Seattle can go in there and actually win a game on the road against a very formidable opponent with lots of really good skill players in a hostile environment. Let's see what they can do. And I'm pumped for this one.
Monday Night Mike will have a lot to say about that. And I'm pumped for it too, because the last 2 seasons they've played each other and they've been off the chain scoreboard breakers, just fantastic football games. And now we get it on a Monday night stage. I know what you're thinking, but this Seattle team, the reason I was so big on them and obviously having some connections to the Pacific Northwest and Seahawk fans in general, this Seattle team has gone back to playing punch you in your throat defense that made Seattle what they were. Mike McDonald, I talked about him a little bit earlier, making Brock Purdy look pedestrian. I mean, as much as I think this game could go crazy scoreboard-wise, I've got a lean there that, I'm going to hold on to, but it's going to be a fantastic game regardless. Again, split Monday Night Football, doubleheader nonsense. This is definitely – last week you could kind of go, hey, both of these games were kind of interesting. This week, there is a massive delineation between the good game and the game you don't even want to waste TV electricity on. Mac, what are your thoughts on the Hawks and the Lions?
I'm a little disappointed in Detroit. I'm going to be honest. I think they're just finding their way a little bit right now. I think it's a little bit of that playoff hangover. It's to throw a baseball reference. I think it's like the Baltimore Orioles this year. I don't know. We don't know what happened to the Baltimore Orioles here at the end of the year. I think the Lions are the same thing. I think the Lions are focused so much on wanting to get to the playoffs. They're not focused on the regular season, which is very, very hard for me to understand with Campbell as a coach. But they just don't seem to. The little things that they were doing the last couple of years, they're not as in tune this year. And so I'm a little bit worried about Detroit. As far as Seattle, I agree with what you guys said. Defensively, this team looks really, really good. They can get any sort of offense whatsoever. That division's pretty tough. Let me tell you, that's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to actually talk real quick before we get to our final thoughts here. 2 different spots from that division. The Los Angeles Rams are on the road at the Chicago Bears. The Bears favored by 3, and the over-under is at 41.5. Now, we've got an interesting situation here. The Rams are still decimated. That hasn't changed. The come-from-behind win against the 49ers. They get a big win in the division, their first win of the year. Statistically speaking, teams coming off of large comebacks, and we're talking large, like 14 points or more, on the road the next week, typically don't fare well. Let's not polish a turd here. The Rams had a good win last week and a gritty win to come from behind, decimated like they are. I love the stat, but I don't necessarily know if I love the stat with them playing Chicago. So that's an interesting game that I wanted to gauge your guys real quick on. Rams and Bears. I'm leaning towards the Bears, but right now covering 3 for the Bears seems like a big ask, but I'm looking for a little letdown factor from the Rams. Mac.
And you know what? And here's the thing. The Bears have been close in the last couple, first week. They're going to break through at some point. TJ's favorite new quarterback is going to have a good week. It's going to happen. You just know it's going to happen. I feel bad for the Rams. I mean, this is, again, it's a really good team that's just so banged up right now. I think this is the week the Bears get it done.
Oh, Max calling a shot.
Look, I'm with you, Mac. I think the Bears do get it done as well. And for one of the reasons that you said, my record on Caleb Williams is all right. Like, how I feel about him. But you're right. He's going to have a good week. He's going to put it all together. This team is too good to not put it together. And so I think this might be the opportunity. The Rams, they might be wishing that they could get Aaron Donald back out of retirement at this point, because a half an Aaron Donald is probably better than what they've got right now. This defense is god awful, and they are lucky they got a win last week, in my opinion. So
yeah,
I can see.
By the way, do we know who got that football last week? Who got that football?
Who cares?
Not a clue. Yeah, I'm not on the Rams at all. They're almost the level of Atlanta and New Orleans for me right now. I like Chicago in this game. I think they cover that number with ease.
All right, there you go. So pick the Rams, because all three of us are on the Bears -3. Last little thing before we get to the final thoughts here. We've seen this now 3 weeks in a row. And again, I'm trying not to pull the top off my final thoughts, but 3 weeks in a row, the biggest favorite has lost. That distinction falls on a team that has kind of an identity crisis this week. The San Francisco 49ers are 10-point favorites at home against the New England Patriots. You've got a San Francisco team that's in a little bit of disarray right now, whether it be injuries, whether it be anything. Christian McCaffrey is seeing a specialist in freaking Germany right now. You've got Trent and Ayuk, still getting their sea legs back under them. Oh, by the way, where's the goalpost movement now on Brock Purdy? You wanted to see him do it with no weapons. He's done it. You've wanted to see him put up good numbers when the game mattered. He's done it. Stop hating on Brock Purdy. That being said, San Francisco, a 10-point favorite at home against the Patriots, coming off of back-to-back losses. I'll start with you, TJ. Does that number scare you in any way?
100%. 100%. And the reason why it scares me is, yes, look, I'm all in on Brock Purdy now. I've seen enough of a sample size. I've seen enough of what he can do. I am in. That guy is legit starter. Pay that man his money. But it's exactly that. It's the injuries, though. And look, this team is known for, better than anybody. The 49ers are going to run the ball. They're going to throw the ball. And then by the time you turn around, you're down 21-0, and that's the ball game. Then the defense takes over. This team with the injuries, I just don't know if they have the horses on offense to cover the 10. And look, New England is not great. Jacoby is not the answer. He's obviously just the waiting. He's just a filling guy until Drake's ready to go. But that 10, way too. I wouldn't touch that at all. I'd be more, if I was going to make a play on this game, I would go under. And I hate unders.
I know unders are not fun. We talked about that last week. I mean, I wouldn't even bet this with Vegas. Max stacks of money right there. Mac, what do you think? Because I know you've had some interesting thoughts on both of these teams. Like, the Niners are in disarray and the Patriots just aren't good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know what that was on my TV the other night against the Jets. That was absolutely disgusting. Man, I mean, holy cow. Especially, and it was a surprise to me because I was really excited to see them play because, they had played pretty well going before that. So, but this is a Patriots team that, again, they're trying to find themselves. I think Mayo's he's going to do a good job. I really do there. But, I talked about this in their preview. When do they make that call to just let, Jacoby be done and go to their young stud and see what he can do? That's what it's going to come down for the Patriots. Patriot Nation is getting a little restless. It's been a couple of years. They don't like these rebuilds. They don't like these put-togethers. But they're a long way off. There's not a lot on that Patriots team at all, either side of the ball.
No, there definitely isn't. So let's steer into some final thoughts. A big weekend of football ahead, and I'll start with my final word. Remember this, please. We're in week 3 of the NFL season, about to head into week 4. We know nothing. There's no power ranking that's going to tell you anything. You haven't lost a Super Bowl. You haven't won a Super Bowl. You've put yourself behind the 8 ball? Maybe, sure. But let's not put the cart before the horse here. We've got teams getting guys back soon off injury, other teams dealing with injuries. The overreaction is comical to me on both the college side and the NFL side to start every season. The reason we haven't given you our NFL power rankings yet, because they are useless until we get 4 weeks into the season. And save me with the, well, you only get 17 of these. I don't care. We've seen plenty of teams come from behind from the wild card, make a late season run, calm down. And to quote Aaron Rodgers, relax. TJ.
Couldn't agree with you more, brother. We're all overreacting, right? I'm making a big deal about the Saints and the Falcons, and they could easily be the top 2 teams in the division when all is said and done. But at the same time, it's okay to look at some of these numbers that we're seeing and go, that doesn't, for week 4, I don't know if I'm going to spend my money there this week. I think I'm going to find a little bit more value. That's totally okay. And nobody's going to, in week 17, when you've built your bankroll up, nobody's going to look back and go, man, you really should have bet that -10 on San Francisco in week 4. Nobody's going to care about that. So keep doing what you're doing. Make educated, smart decisions. And yes, it is week 4. Stop freaking out.
Mac, final word. After he unmutes himself. Should we let him go?
I think what he's saying is the Steelers are frauds. The Falcons are frauds. Derek Carr is the greatest quarterback ever.
Hey, Vegas Mac.
I had to wait until my dogs got done.
The dogs are going to bark all weekend long, baby.
I know. Dear NFL GMs, if you got a stack of money, are you going to put it underneath your bed? Hell no, you're not. You're going to build a bank and then put the money in the bank. So why don't you do the same thing with your quarterbacks? Instead of putting your young quarterbacks out there to get just absolutely demolished, why don't you build yourself an offensive line to protect these poor guys and give them a little bit of, protection. They don't need to play the first game. They don't even need to play the first year. Take a look at some of the Hall of Famers that sat and waited. Take your money, build your bank, build your offensive line, and then maybe, just maybe, you'll win a game, Carolina, over somebody like that. I don't know.
Oh, firing shots there at the end. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Tell your friends, tag your friends at Mike Arana Show on all the socials. We're going to talk baseball wild card Monday night. We're going to get you ready for all those series in a crazy finish. We're going to be all over it, and we'll be back for another Football Friday. For TJ, for Vegas Mac, I'm Mike. We're out.